All right. So, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome,
Me?
welcome for the very first episode of the MEM Xperience podcast. And today I have Mr. Mike Danoski with me here.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, sir. How are you?
Thanks for having me. This is good. I guess it just now sunk in. This is the very first one, so it's an honor to be the first one. We'll break it in and see how it
How
goes.
about that? You're the very
Yeah,
first one. So,
yeah, and
we really want to cover today and having you here, Mike, so you can talk about all the good stuff that you're working on, right, in the product. But
Mhm.
first, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, talk
Sure,
about, your team, like the features you work on, etc.
absolutely. So my name is Mike Danoski. I am on the. I guess we don't really have like team names, but device configuration, security, and that's within MEM. So my team focuses on everything device config, mostly focused on Windows. We also build the engine that other teams use for their policy generation, mostly device configuration. I focus almost entirely on device configuration, and for the past year since I've been on the team, I've focused on device configuration for Windows and the settings catalog and other good improvements. I own the ADMX templates as well as the other templates that exist in the console for Windows device config. And my team owns Endpoint Security, and then the broader team up from that owns resource access, and then the broader team up from that is all of our Windows settings and everything, and then MEM and so on and so forth.
All good
And
stuff.
yeah, exactly. And at one point, our umbrellas are the same. So once we get to the MEM point, I think, because you're over in CXE,
That's
right?
exactly
Which
right.
I came from as well, but on a different branch, right? When Windows 8 was coming out, so we started supporting Windows 8 client stuff, client config, GPOs mostly, right? And all that fun stuff. And then that moved into 8.1, focused more on the client, less on the AD core bits like file replication and all that fun stuff. Focused mostly on
Hmm.
client config, and then from that they needed someone to work on. Oh, this is good. They needed someone to work on Windows Phone
There we go.
in
There we
support.
go.
And so me and a few other folks, the team slowly started, and we were working with a lot of the cutting edge customers who were starting to use Windows Phone in the enterprise. And the Windows Phone enterprise scenarios are with MDM. So that was my first cut into Intune. Met a lot of the Intune folks through working through some of those support cases, as well as a lot of the
That's
Windows
awesome.
Phone folks, and a lot of the same people we work with today for device config in Windows. Um, and yeah, so it was cool. I kind of got to see MDM grow from kind of the beginning. I say kind of the beginning because it was always pretty well along by then. And then the history would show that Windows adopted that MDM stack moving forward for management, and that's when I moved over to Intune into the product group as a service engineer on the support side. So we would help build out all the support articles, take escalations, and work with dev, get everything fixed as they came up, and then even further later on, helping build support teams and all that fun stuff. So I'll always say that support's a
That's awesome.
great way to learn about a product.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
and then, yeah, I moved over from that team to be a feature PM where I am now about a year ago. So,
That's awesome, man.
yeah,
What a great story. What a great career, so far. That's awesome.
that's it's
And
it's still going.
yeah, it's a great career. Great job. And by the way, I think, correct if I'm wrong here, but I believe the MDM protocol was introduced with Windows 8.1, right? Which is exactly when we start getting exposure, it seems.
For Windows, I think there was a subset in Windows 8.0. Uh, Windows Phone 8.0 had MDM, I believe. Windows 8.1 really moved everything forward. Um, Before that, I think there was, right, we were using EAS protocol over email. So
Mm-hmm.
you would get
Mm-hmm.
like mailbox protection when you would get an
Yep.
email profile installed. That was probably my first foray into figuring out conflict resolution.
There we
Why is
go.
this phone doing this thing? Oh, do you have an email profile on it? Right, and going from
Oh,
there.
something went wrong. Just wipe it out,
Yeah,
right?
remove the email profile. Oh, it doesn't work anymore. Oh, okay, it works now. All right. Um,
Exactly.
and then yeah, and actually the Windows Mobile before that had quite a few settings as well.
Hmm.
Um, More than I think what initially with Windows Phone came out with, but obviously it was a different platform, kind of. But yeah, so it's started there, and that's where we kind of learned a lot. I say kind of because I worked really closely with a good friend of mine, Dave Alessi, who you probably know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and so
Hmm.
we've sort
Great
of
guy.
worked together a lot over the years, and um, yeah, so him and I were sort of figuring out Windows Phone at the time, at least in our support team. The really cool part about it at
Right.
that time is you'd get like these pieces of information because you'd hear like, oh, there's this other support team, or the Exchange team has some Windows Phone experts, and oh, this consultant out in this other region is working on Windows Phone, and then we were able to sort of start collaborating and stuff. But it's really cool time to be working back then. I'll see. I'm not getting paid for every time that I say Windows Phone, but actually, I just noticed I am wearing a Cortana shirt that
Oh yeah.
is from
There we go.
Windows Phone from Ignite 2015. So
Looks good on you.
I promise I'm not getting officially paid for this specifically. So
Right. No, this is great, man. This is great. I don't know if you can share with us here a little bit about. So we're gonna talk specifically today about settings catalog, right?
yeah,
Which is the last feature that you shipped,
yeah.
that you worked on very hard to ship in the team. But like, what are kind of the other features that you have worked before that you shipped?
Yeah, there's a lot of fit and finish and maintenance things that go on, as well as anytime that there's something that's sort of a product-wide initiative. There's work to make sure that that works with whichever workload you own. So if we have a new reporting initiative, we're going out, we're building out new reports. Each team has to go figure out what that makes sense for them and how to snap in and making sure that the timelines align and all that stuff. So doing a lot of that sort of more horizontal work. Like I said earlier, I own the ADMX space, so I think the very first thing, so I adopted a lot of things, including settings catalog was an adoption. It was pretty early on when I had joined, and it had already been worked on for quite some time before that. But the first ship I think we had was the new UX for the administrative templates. So administrative
Hmm.
templates used to just be a big page, or I think it was a big page with 125 pages. You would scroll through, and it had search, um, and that was in a Blade. And so when we went to the full screen experience, we introduced the look that looks and feels like GP Edit, because that's where people are used to interacting with ADMX. So built out the tree view and everything. Um, and then yeah, so ADMX is a space that I own, and then just little different places around the DC landscape, right? So new settings coming
Right.
in, making sure that they get built, all that
DC, which stands to device
device
configuration,
configuration.
right?
Yep. So
Yeah.
everything
So good.
under
No, this is great.
devices and device configuration, under there for Windows. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. This is awesome. So yeah, let's then talk a little bit about settings catalog, right? So I'm seeing a lot of excitement in the community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people saying, "Mike Danoski, thank you so much, sir, for this. We're waiting for this. Thank you." Right. So what do you why you just don't start talking about this
Yeah.
real quick if you can,
Yeah, absolutely. It actually that's a good segue because we talk about early on when I had joined the team versus now. So early on when I joined the team, as you can imagine at Microsoft, there's a lot of working together in teams, working across teams. Well, you know, but the listeners, the listeners may not.
Oh yeah, that's good to mention.
There's
Yeah.
collab nonstop. You're constantly working with other teams. Hey, we're building this just for awareness. Can this integrate? Should this not integrate? Things like that. What's the story? So when I started, you would get an email that would say something like, "Hey, these are some new settings. We'd like to add them into this place for configuration, so on and so forth." And that process itself was quite hands-on, I'll say. So it was, what are the settings? What's the CSP path? CSP is a configuration service provider. So For folks listening who may not know, Windows has a list of configuration service providers. If you're used to GPO, GPO touches a CSE or a client-side extension and then goes and makes configurations, whereas in MDM, we talk to configuration service providers, the big one being Policy CSP. As the Windows team builds new features, they build new ways to manage these new features. It's either a CSP or it goes into Policy CSP, or they'll build an ADMX backed setting. For the most part, if it's in Windows proper. So people would say, hey, here's this new feature, can we manage it? And it was UX design specs and figuring out new controls and how do we create it and where does it belong and stuff like that. And it actually takes quite a while. Back then as well, we would do different graph endpoints for things like that. And so we were constantly, adding to the graph schema and stuff like that. So it would take some time. And obviously the feedback that we had heard was that it was taking a long time to add settings. And if you've been waiting for a setting in Intune, you've probably ended up just using custom policy with OMA URI to set it up. And so that was the feedback that we got as well. With custom OMA URI, it's hard for us to tell what you're putting in there. So we don't know if there's any special casing or anything like that that we need to take care of for that setting. We don't get that with custom. Whereas if a certain profile requires atomicity or something like that, we don't catch that there. Or if we need to do special casing for reporting. So really bringing this all forward, the idea that behind settings catalog was to first start off and say, look, we've built all this stuff up over time. Let's look at if there's a way that we can build a new settings library that literally has every setting that Windows supports, and then build a dynamic user experience that will read through this library and create controls and settings and things like that based on the catalog. And so it really is the foundation for us to move forward. Some of the growing pains that we had around our ability to quickly add settings was apparent when we started. You get to the point where I'll give an example. Is right now on our radar, there's about 7,500 settings for Windows that we want to set. And that's a lot when you're going through and hand designing each one and stuff like that. So, so that's really the direction change with settings catalog. And with that, we get to bring a whole bunch of fun stuff along. Like when you go into Intune today and you're going to go select device configuration and create a profile, you have to be able to look at those names and understand, well, these are in device restrictions, these are in endpoint protection. Oh, this is over here, this is over there. In moving forward, we want the decision to be that there are your entry point is based on how you want to create the policy, not what's in the policy. And so I can actually show a demo of this. I can show a demo of the entry point.
I think it's going to be easier.
Yeah. So before we get into the actual settings catalog demo, there's an important piece to cover first. So going in here to configuration profiles, one of the key changes we're making with the release of settings catalog is this decision right here. So today, when you go to create a profile, you'll see these templates that exist today. Each one of these has a unique collection of settings, usually based around the scenario. And the decision today is you need to know where the setting exists in one of these templates in order for you to successfully configure that setting or that scenario. The decision we'd like to change up here is, would you like to create a policy from scratch? Basically build it however you want, right? Totally custom. Or would you like to start with a template? And so today we only have the template approach. So the settings catalog really marks the first time that we're building this new way to create a policy that's entirely based on only the settings that you'd like to add. So it's very much a what you see is what you get. And so by taking that fundamental question of where the setting is out of the equation, we're getting to the point where you're picking how do you want to actually create the profile. Do you want to create it from scratch? Do you want to use a template? And then sort of spiritually beyond a template would be a baseline, where it's essentially a template that has a collection of configurable settings for a single scenario, but it also has recommendations. So let's jump into the settings catalog. I'll go ahead and name it. and pop right in. I did select Windows 10, and the settings catalog also exists for Mac OS. For Mac OS, the settings that are there right now are for Edge on Mac. For Windows today, we have many of the settings that exist today in maybe device restrictions or endpoint security that you're used to. We're adding additional ADMX settings as we go, as well as any other existing settings that aren't there today we'll continue to add. And so at time of public preview, which rolled out second week of February, or third week of February, sort of, I guess second week of February, we have coverage for most of the settings that we already have today, as well as some new ones, but you can expect to see over coming months many more settings being added as we go. And so what will they look like when you see these settings? I'm going to sort of, when you open up the settings picker here, so I've clicked add settings here, I can see above lock, this is a CSP. All of these, a CSP is a configuration service provider. That's the client side or the Windows side component that handles these settings when they write. And so we are building all of these settings directly off of CSP and DDF documentation. And so if it exists in a CSP, theoretically we can add it here. And when we do that, we're going to bring over all of the intelligence and all of the logic directly from the configuration service provider. So what that looks like is our tooltips here, and you'll see these here as well as once I add it over into the actual policy. But you'll see the tooltip here is written directly. It should match exactly with what we have in docs. Sometimes if we can add a little bit of extra information that can help you make a decision on how to set the setting or some context or something like that, we can add that. But you'll see here this takes me right over to documentation. When I add this setting, you'll see it shows up over here on the left. These are all dynamically generated settings controls. You'll see the tooltip there. And what that means is that it really lowers our lowers the amount of time that it takes for us to add new settings. And when we do add settings, they're going to match exactly what's written by Windows. And so let's say that I want to look for another big change that we're doing here. Let's say that I want to look for a setting. So let's say I want to disable Bluetooth, and I come down here to the Bluetooth CSP. You'll notice that there's a lot of settings about how Bluetooth can behave, but there's nothing for actually disallowing Bluetooth in this category. So I'm going to search for Bluetooth up here, click search, and now I'll see the Bluetooth category that I saw before, but now I also see connectivity. If I look at connectivity, I can see that there's allow Bluetooth. So I'm going to add that to my policy as well as these ones. I'm not going to review them here. I know that these all have to do with Bluetooth, and this policy, my goal by the end of it is to build up a policy that will help me lock down our Bluetooth scenario. And this policy can consist of just that if I want. I can have a policy that just has Bluetooth stuff. When I actually go in and click save, when I click next, assign it, apply a scope tag if I need, and then I review and create and click save, the policy will only consist of the settings that I've specified here. This is a new approach on how we handle not configured, which I'll get into in just a moment. Before I go there, I do want to point out that you'll see this blue note here that says there are 7 settings out of 8 that are not configured in this category. So I'm going to clear out my search term here, and I'm going to go find the connectivity CSP. And you'll notice there's additional settings here that I may want to add. If I was just using search and I didn't have this message, I might miss that there's available settings there as well. So I'll add these in as well so I can review them. One more thing that I want to do, let's say for this scenario, I'm actually trying to set up a policy for HoloLens. I can click apply. This will show me all of the settings and only the settings that apply to HoloLens. And the reason I say all and only is because today you may have to create multiple profiles in order to fully configure that scenario that you're trying to light up. With settings catalog, you'll see all of the settings that are applicable to that. So not only the device lock settings that you could use on any Windows Enterprise machine, but also some of the specific settings for that scenario. So I actually like what I have over here, and I confirmed from here that I can turn off Bluetooth on HoloLens. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the picker, and now I'm going to go over here and set state for any of these. So if I want to set these to block, I can do that. Or let's say I get in here and I say, actually, I don't want these. So I'm going to click this minus button. When I click the minus button, you'll see this note changes from the control over to saying allow Cortana above lock has been set to not configured. What that means is that that setting is no longer in this policy. And in settings catalog, the policy only consists of the settings that are configured. This can cause some issues. Historically, we've seen issues where even though you say allow here, this isn't blocking this setting specifically for that user. They're allowed to prepare, or they're allowed to use Bluetooth with this setting. However, if I have a conflicting policy where I have the same setting with a different value, we'll still detect that as a conflict. And so historically, and the feedback that we get is that we need to handle what's called tri-state, which is not only an on-off, but also a not configured. And so settings catalog allows for this. And when I click this, you can see that it says not configured. If this was an edit flow and I'm coming in to edit a policy and this was already set, when I set this to not configured and click save, the next time the device checks in, it'll go ahead and send a remove command to that CSP node. CSPs do behave a little bit differently case by case on how they remove a setting. For example, if you set not configured down to BitLocker, it's not going to decrypt the drive. If you remove, let's say, password settings, we're not going to remove the password. We're just going to remove the enforcement basically on that password. Where other things, it may actually turn something back on or turn something back off. One other nice thing about this is if I set something to not configured, at least within this same session, and I undo, the value is preserved, which might seem trivial at first, but if you've got a list or something like that, and you accidentally click this, instead of having to go back out, so as a reminder as well, if you completely back out of the policy and don't save it, when you come back in, it'll be in the state that it was. But if you're in state here and you just accidentally did that, or maybe did it on purpose and you want to go back, you can undo that as well, and the values will all still be there. So now let's say that I actually want to remove this whole category because I don't want to configure it. We have remove category. The difference between remove category and removing a single setting is a remove category will remove the whole category here, and there's no undo. If you want to undo, you can go back into add settings and find the category and add the settings back. But for this, on a per setting, you can simply undo to bring them back. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to disallow Bluetooth. That's really what I came here for. Let's say, hey, I didn't know that this setting exists, but I actually, I remember an email chain where someone is asking for that, so we're going to go ahead and add that into our policy as well. I can go ahead and actually remove this as well. So I've just got these two settings that I want. Again, if I want more information, I can come back here and learn more. I can go ahead and select next, assign this, use scope tags if I need, review, create, and it'll show up just in line with all my other policies. Moving forward, you'll see templates and baselines start to adopt some of this as well. That's sort of some long-term work. It's going to take some time. Right now, our next priorities here in Settings Catalog are to add additional settings, add additional filters, and just keep on improving this as we go. And if you have feedback, please share, of course. So with that, that's all I have for the demo. Yeah.
And just like that, we're back here. Our faces are back, Mr. Mike.
I don't know how you do it.
There we go. I don't know either.
I'm convinced.
It's my huge production team. I have like 15 people working for me here in this podcast.
Just running around. Yeah. Just cutting things out. Got it.
Yeah. So this is great, Mike. Thanks for the demo. I think this is very, very helpful to see. If you can maybe summarize for us kind of the why, right? So what is the big why for this feature, right? So why you start working on it, kind of the main points, the feedback which you mentioned before, right? But I would like you if you can just summarize it for us, the main whys for this feature.
Totally. So the big why is simplification. And that might seem counterintuitive if you're taking it at this thing of like, you've just added another way for me to do the same thing. That's not simplification. But really what this is we're putting this massive investment in the simplification of device configuration. And we thought, what better way to exemplify this by taking all of these settings we've added and show them in a catalog where you can pick and choose. Now it's great to have guided scenarios and
In a
dude
motorcycle by your
dude on a
house.
motorcycle flying down the street. I'm glad you heard it and I just didn't look like a crazy person. But but yeah, they funny quick story real quick. I live on a corner
Uh,
and in the summer when I have my window open, it's
uh,
wild. I have to wear headphones and have a very close microphone.
really?
Um
Too much
I don't
noise?
know where these cars are going or where they're coming from, but it's just motorcycles and there's a Dodge Viper and a straight pipe Miata and all that stuff.
Really?
And I'm a car guy, so I can hear it and I'm like,
Right.
that's a Subaru. That's yep, that's a Subaru.
There we go.
It's the joy of working from home. Although I will say it happens in the office too. You'll hear someone
Oh,
drive by,
really?
especially right on, Microsoft campus is right on 520
Oh,
up
that's
in
right. That's right.
Redmond. And so
That's
you'll
right.
hear, depending on where your building is, you'll hear, and sometimes it's the same time of the day, you know, same car. So the whys of settings catalog. So the simplification of it is let's show everything that's out that we've built out. If you want to build whatever you like, right? These are the building blocks to go build a profile. If you want to build a profile with 500 settings in it, go ahead and do it. If you want to build a policy that has one setting in it, by all means do that as well. That's not super simple for the folks who more so need like a guided scenario or they want to see things that are specific to their vertical or to their industry. So that's the next step, right? Is to take now these all of these settings that we've sort of bulk added, and the settings are they have logic built behind them as to applicability that's not based on research and things like that. So we actually, when a new CSP comes out, if it's not available on this version of Windows, we can detect that and we won't send it down. You'll get fewer errors. We can better handle conflict resolution, as you saw on the infrastructure on how we actually save the settings and things like that. And
Right.
so, long term, short term, this might look like here's another way to do something. Long term, you'll see the settings catalog have all of our available settings, minus some of the ones we talked about earlier, right? Where it needs a little bit more like this is very easy to misconfigure if not set up in this specific way
Right.
or something like that. But generally speaking, it will have all of the configurable settings, and then you'll see those same setting names, same descriptions, maybe slightly different controls based on what we're doing, right? So if you're in a baseline and we show you the setting, maybe there it makes sense to be a drop down so that you can select not configured and it doesn't go away or something like that. It's really
Right.
that's really where we're thinking next. It's not concrete yet on a lot of these, but that's really where we're
No, this is
going. So
great.
we can actually simplify things, even though up front it might look like another way to do the same thing. And I will say that they still all one of the things I was very very careful of. So coming from support, I'm always thinking about doomsday, thinking about how can this mess up, right?
Right.
So everything works with what we have today. So if you deploy a setting through the settings catalog that conflicts with something you've set in endpoint security, we'll detect the conflict. We use the same reporting backend, all that good stuff. So it all plays together nicely. Um, so yeah,
That's good because
and
that's
then
one
we
of the questions that I have. So here's what I'm gonna try to do now, if we
yeah,
can, Mike. I don't know if you wanna
absolutely.
talk about anything else about the feature that you wanna highlight here
No,
before we go into the questions.
I'll just say it's in preview right now. We're adding more settings. We are making some cosmetic changes as we go. You'll see some UX changes, some shortcuts to navigate back and forth a little more easy. You'll see as we get feedback, maybe some settings name changes or something like that, or more information added to tooltips and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
the biggest thing is more settings. And then, like I showed the OS edition filter, we're thinking about more ideas for filters and stuff like that to really help because it really is when it's 7,000 settings, finding the right one. Search is great, filter is great. If you're getting beyond that, what can we do to sort of narrow that down before we get into the solution of like, okay, these are the 16 settings you need for configuring BitLocker, and here's your template type thing. So
Right. So right now
yeah,
it's in public preview.
public preview as of so. if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen sort of the live tweeting a cloud deployment, which is risky in itself because things change, things take time to roll out. Sometimes we learn new things as we go through the deployment. Normally, so for this one, um, we went out on 216, I think, and it took a couple days to roll out, which for a rollout makes sense, but sort of from my standpoint, trying to corral some of that and make sure I'm providing the right information could be a little bit challenging as a single person. Normally it takes a whole comms team to do that. If you're familiar with the what's new and in development and all the blogs and all the doc updates that come out and things like that, that's teams of people who do that. So I did my best.
No, you did a great job with the
yes,
blog too. I saw the blog. It's
216.
great.
Oh, the blog is out as well. I think that came out last Monday, maybe,
Yeah,
or last Monday or this Monday. Last Monday.
I believe last Monday. Yes.
And the docs are up. Yeah. So check those out as well if you want to get some more information, and then keep an eye on what's new for new stuff coming out. I guess the other areas that, because we were talking earlier about some of the other areas, and
Yeah, sure.
ADMX updates. Keep an eye out where we update the Edge ADMX settings every month, or not every time there's a new Edge release and stuff like that, and updating the Office settings and all that good stuff. So
For sure. No, this is great.
release
Okay.
is fun.
Yeah, I know you've been working really hard on that stuff. We know that here. So yeah, let's try to jump then into the questions, right? So what I'm gonna try to do, Mike, is to see, right, and if I can represent most of the customer questions
Okay.
that I heard from my customers, that I'm seeing the community, etc., and see if you can answer all of them for us. So
Yes. I love you. You might have seen this. I love answering questions, and
I
even
know.
in when there's tons of questions. I don't know if you see me go into the turbo round, right, or the lightning round, but
Right.
I'll keep it slow and I'll be okay.
Yeah. So let's see. If I didn't represent your question here, please feel free to send your question as the comment in this video here. So feel free to send it. We'll try to respond as well. Here's the thing. First question. We have that's a kind of common question from customers, right? And then you kind of touch on it as you were explaining, about the feature and kind of summarizing it, right? We have different ways of creating policies in Configuration Manager, right? So I call it traditional device configuration profiles, right? You have endpoint security. Now we have settings catalog, right? So are there any plans to unify those experiences, different experiences?
Good question. So unify might not be the right word, but simplify. What I'll say from that is as I mentioned earlier, is our way of exposing every setting that we have, that we've created and tested and all of this stuff in this dynamic way. And you'll start to see that pop up in different areas. So a great example would be endpoint security. So endpoint security today, you might not see those settings over in device configuration and things like that. What the goal we'd like to hit is, the first tenet is instead of choosing your profile by what's in the profile, choose it by how you want to create the profile. So if you want to add some BitLocker settings, fixed drive BitLocker settings, you can do it in the catalog, or you can load up a template, and you can load up that template from device config, or you can load it up from endpoint security. The purpose of endpoint security is really for the security admin to be able to go in and sort of configure very, very security focused things that maybe the device administrator doesn't really see, or maybe they don't have the expertise or something like that in order to configure those things, right? So those are a lot of the great areas in endpoint security where you're lighting up all the great features of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. What we'd like to do is make it so that endpoint security is a subset of everything that's available in device configuration. And when I say device configuration, I mean the MEM console devices, device configuration. As clicking through, right? I should go this way. So that being sort of the superset of everything, and then the specific endpoint security stuff being over in endpoint security, all the settings being available in the catalog, creating templates that make sense for the scenario you're trying to light up, and then baselines for scenarios that make sure that that probably need some sort of recommendation, right? And so that's where we're sort of moving right now. I think we're doing a good job at what we have today. The other thing I'll sort of talk about, and you might have seen the same thing, is it's really, really helpful to frame it. If you have a feature request, frame it in the thing that it's solving. Frame it in the problem it's solving, because there might be, if it's sort of closed thinking of like, I need this setting. So say I'm like, I need disable CD-ROM or something like that,
Right.
or I need this specific thing. Like that's good feedback. The better feedback is, in my environment, I have these that need to be locked down, or I have these that are causing a conflict, and this is how I'm set up and stuff like that. And framing the problem, for me at least, is more useful for us to be able to sort of consider if there's other alternatives. That's a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about as well. As someone will say, "Hey, I need the ability to." It's not on here, but I'm gonna bring a user voice for you, Andre, right now. It's it's the one around repushing policy, right?
Oh,
And so
yes.
for me, if you say like, I want to repush a policy, a single policy, I'm like, okay, let's dig one step deeper into that. Why do you want to repush a policy? Because
Exactly.
technically, every time we sync, if we determine something's out of order, we'll push it, and we generally push everything all in one thing. And it might not be obvious that we're doing that every time. It might look like we're just reporting on every sync, but we're actually trying to enforce that setting.
Device checking, right? So that's the device checking
Yeah,
process. That's what you mean.
yeah. So if you have a new setting and you're like, I just want to push this one setting,
Right.
if you do a device sync, it'll sync the whole device. We'll send everything. Now, if I dig into that feedback and you're like, well, I installed this app and it got into this weird state, or it failed and it's not detecting to do this, like that's a
Right.
totally different question for me,
Right.
at least. And I'm going to think about different ways of solving that based on what the question is. Or, I install this VPN profile and it gets into a weird state. I just want to pull it off and reapply it. Again, totally different case, totally different mechanisms. I wouldn't recommend just hitting sync, because if something's in a bad state, it's probably
Right.
not going to help. So
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So that means then people should, customers should focus more on the why. So why they need that feature, right? Because that brings kind of the
yeah,
whole context for, yeah, sometimes that's kind of struggle, right? Because people, especially in user voice, are more like speaking their minds, right?
yeah,
And yeah, they don't think a lot. There's some really good items here that you can see that people really thought through this, and thought about the whys, etc. But that's definitely a good heads up for the community, for customers. Think about
yeah.
the
Just
why.
just a little bit of framing the problem
Yeah,
goes a long way.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. This
And
is
if there's
great.
something we can do today to help you, like if we say like, oh, that's the problem, try and use this other thing instead, or try and do this thing together
Right,
instead today. So,
right, right.
yep,
Excellent. So, any other user voices that you want to bring as well?
I'm done. I'm not looking at it anymore right
Close user voice. Close user voice.
now.
No, this is great, Mike. Okay, so with that, then I think we can close here. So, do you have any final comments or questions for me, maybe, or questions for customers or comments?
No, just keep the feedback coming is really the big one. I, I'll go back and count this and give myself a high five every time I said feedback. But um, the feedback is really what helps us build this stuff out, especially for stuff that's in preview. So if you have questions, if you have comments, suggestions, stuff like that, find a way to get in contact with us, whether it's user voice support. Some are more reliable than others. Like I did on Twitter the other day, what's your biggest question from Intune, and got some feature requests, but then also got some honest questions about like, when I do this, what happens? When I do that, what happens? Type
Right,
stuff, which we can totally answer. So,
right.
uh, yeah, just keep in touch is the big one.
For sure. Good point. Good point.
Yeah,
I think with that, then we can close here, Mike. So it's been awesome to have you here, man. Really appreciate
yeah.
your time here. I know you're a very busy man.
First
It,
one's done.
it was great talk. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Honestly, it's been awesome. Settings catalog's out. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on and chat with you about this, and sort of do a little bit of some brain dump on what I'm thinking in the device config space and where we're headed. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Mike. Thanks everybody for watching. So I see you next time.